It would be nice if people were a little more trustworthy and you could do a co-boat ownership. I don't need a boat every weekend, and I'm super nice, reasonable person if I found the same person, same mindset, and we both shared the boat cost 50-50 and just leaved it filled up with gas when done and cleaned up. Then that would be ideal because a 25 to 30 foot boat is extremely expensive to own and buy. Zach, that is a great topic. There are a lot of people that have that same mindset of wanting to be able to get into a bigger boat and be able to use a much bigger boat if they had a partner on the boat. So we're going to get into the cons and pros of this. I do want to thank our show sponsor, PartsView.com. They can't really help you as far as finding a trustworthy person to buy a bigger boat and go a co-boat owner with, but they can help you with providing all the parts and easy maintenance kits to maintain that boat. When it comes time to do any kind of service on your boat, you can get a discount also of up to $50 when you use the link and coupon codes in the description below. Again, that's PartsView.com. They have all your boating needs, parts, accessories, outboard parts, all that kind of stuff. Now, when it comes to finding yourself a partner on a boat, that is something, Zach Ridden, you need to be extremely careful on. I have seen this go very well, and I have seen this go very bad. The biggest problem, and probably what the thing that everybody thinks about right off the top of their head, is what happens when something goes wrong. I do know of a friend of mine, two friends of mine actually, where I had two friends. They both partnered on a boat and the boat ended up sinking. So luckily for them, they had insurance on the boat, which covered them, made them both whole, that whole 9 yards. But that is something that you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about a partnership on a boat. Because like you said, it's the trustworthiness. You don't want to get into a partnership with somebody where you both split let's say a $150,000 boat. It's a 28, it's a 32 footer, something like that. And you bought it for 150 grand, 75,000 a piece. Boom. Now you guys are rolling. You're in a really nice boat. Everything's awesome. But if the one person is always wanting to use it on the weekend and the other person never gets to use it, that could be a conflict. Or if the other person goes out and uses all the gas out of it, like you said, and then leaves the tank empty. Now the other person fills the tank up, uses a quarter tank, and then goes ahead and leaves it, and the other person comes along, uses it, doesn't fill up the tank, and then leaves it for the other guy. Those are two things that can become a massive problem and could become a legal issue, if not at worst, ruin the friendship. So I think that if you are going to do a partnership with somebody on a boat, even if it's like a family member or something like that, because again, you don't want to ruin this relationship with a person just because you partnered on a boat, and everybody knows that a boat is a bust out another $1,000 and things are constantly breaking, the maintenance, and probably if you're going to split a boat like that, I would probably go ahead and drop some insurance on there, because like the situation with my other friends where the boat ended up sinking, you do not want to have that kind of an issue where something happens like that and now you guys are both out the money. So probably splitting the insurance would be a good idea to have on the boat. But I think either way, if you find somebody that you trust enough to do this, that you both like boating, you'd like to go out together, you guys can, upgrade into a bigger boat depending on where you're at. If you go offshore, if you're on the lake, kind of what kind of boat you really want. But if you find that person, either best friend, neighbor, coworker, family member, brother-in-law, whatever it is, I would say that you probably want to get some kind of a contract together. I mean, it's basically you need a prenup in this relationship, because if things do go south, it's way better to have this prenup together where you guys have a contract where if this happens, boom. If that happens, boom. It's already been agreed on. Everybody's good from the get-go. That way it kind of protects both of you. You know what I'm saying? Like if the one person is always using the gas and the other person's never filling it up, that's kind of a problem. So having something to cover all of those bases, and then maybe even getting somebody else to write this contract up. So that way it's kind of like the things that you don't really think about. It's just a situation that you really need to be careful getting into. I agree with you. I think it's great. I mean, if you can find that person that's trustworthy enough to be able to, get into a boat ownership or a co-boat ownership, that's probably why there's so many different boat clubs out there. You got Freedom Boat Club and all these other ones where you are just a member of the club, and that allows you to just go anywhere there is one of these clubs, be able to rent, not rent a boat, but get on a boat, go use the boat, and have like all of that back end stuff taken care of. The cleaning of the boat, the maintenance of the boat, the filling up of the boat with gasoline, all that kind of stuff on the back end. The boat club really fulfills that need in the marketplace. And so same thing with co-owning a boat with your neighbor or your best friend or whatever it may be. I think that if you were to do it, that getting some kind of a contract together, getting a prenup, dog. I mean, if you don't have a prenup, then you got a problem. Like there's an issue here, regardless of how well you know this other person. It's something. I mean, that could even be something out there as like a service that you can find, is being able to get a people together that all want to get co-own a boat. And I'm not saying like get a group of people. I'm saying like if you had this thing where you could, like Facebook or something like that, there was a group where people could go to find other people that want to partner on a boat. Obviously, it could become a place for scams and stuff like that. So maybe not the greatest idea, but I do think that there's a lot of people out there that have that same mentality of they would like to get into a bigger boat or a better boat, and splitting the cost of everything would make everything so much easier and keep people on the water. Because if you're splitting your maintenance costs, let's say it costs you whatever, $2,000 a year to maintain the boat, costs you, I don't know, I mean, whatever the insurance is on a boat, maybe let's say $1,000 to make it easy, $3,000 a year. The storage of the boat, let's say it costs you $2,000 to store the boat somewhere. Now you're up to $5,000 a year just to own the boat. You haven't even filled the gas tank or gone out and used it yet. So if you take that 5 G's and you split that in half, $2,500, divided by 12, that's a lot easier to maintain than it is doing that all by yourself. So Zach, great topic. I think the only way to do it is find somebody that you trust and that you have a really good relationship, like-minded. And then also, I would definitely say putting something into writing. You kind of need something in place to prevent any kind of downfall or, bickering or any kind of problems later on down the road in case something goes south. That contract would definitely be something that, in my opinion, is going to be necessary to make it a successful partnership. Ryan Waterman says, thank you for your insights. Thank you, Ryan. I live in Miami and cruise back and forth to the Bahamas, as well as local cruising between Miami and Key Largo. I don't fish, but like the center console hull and driving position. Having bought new for the first time and constantly dealing with manufacturing defects as well as changes to suit my usage over the past couple of years, I'm thinking about flipping my approach as I move up in size from a 24-foot, 6,000-pound center console hull to a 30 to 35-foot in the 9 to 15,000-pound displacement range, finding a high-quality hull and doing a full rebuild, rewire, power, etc. I know this route is not necessarily cheaper versus slightly used or even new, but it would give me full customization and the peace of mind of knowing exactly how my boat is built. What hulls might you consider or rule out in the 30 to 35 foot likely center console range? Top speed is less important than ride quality and range. I would like to achieve 40 miles an hour cruise with a 300 statute mile usability. Well, Ryan, that is an awesome conversation, because I think there's a lot of people out there that do exactly that. Yeah, center consoles are probably geared more toward fishermen and offshore fishing, stuff like that. But you get the speed out of a center console more than you do other types of boats, sport fish or like big cabin cruisers, stuff like that. Even though you're using it for cruising, center consoles also, if you're going up to the 30 to 35 foot range, one consideration that I'd be thinking about is, one, how many people do you take with you? And are you trying to stay on the boat? It sounds like since you're going towards the center console model, that you're really looking for that range and that 40 mile an hour mark. So that way, if you're cruising 40 mile an hour, you can make it to the Bahamas. Well, I mean, obviously it's going to depend on where you're going. but you can make it there in a relatively short amount of time that saves you and gives you more experience. Like, let's say it takes you 2 hours to get where you're going at 40 miles an hour, but if you were at 25, 30 miles an hour on, say, a cabin cruiser, then it might take you 3 to 4 hours depending on where you're going, and that really eats into your day. But at 2 hours, you can leave the house at, say, 7, be where you want to be at 9, and now you got from 9 till, let's say, 5 o'clock to go around, run around, do whatever you want to do, and then be able to make it back home with just a 2-hour cruise on the water, which most people like to do. So I think there's a lot of people out there that do exactly that. You're not really the fisherman type. You're just cruising around. You like to adventure, check out the islands, kind of look around, hit the sandbars, get in the water, swim, and just be on the water. That's a lot of people out there exactly like that. So the 30 to 35 foot range, as far as redoing it from brand new. Now, when you say redo it, I don't think you're talking about rebuilding the hull. And when I say the hull, I'm talking about the bulkheads and the transom and all that kind of stuff. I think you're really looking for something that is like a hull that you can then, build the way you want to build it. And I'll throw this out there, which is something to think about. I think there's quite a few boat manufacturers out there that will allow you to customize a hull and get it like blank. So you could do the DIY approach. Like if you went to, say, CV and you bought a 32 CV and you bought just the hull. Now, I'm pretty sure that they'll sell you the hull, but they have to sell it with like a bilge pump and, like a couple things like that. There are some legal stipulations there, but I think that might be something that you might also be interested in, is just going to, Contender or CV or Grady White or whatever you kind of are leaning towards. I know you're looking for some brands, and I'll tell you, what I would choose in the 30, 35 foot range, but you could get a hull from the manufacturer and then do it all yourself. Like you can do all the wiring, all the plumbing, all that kind of, like you can do that, but you wouldn't have to get into the actual construction of the hull, because if you get into the complete rebuild where you're doing the bulkheads and all that kind of stuff, you can alter the way that boat rides, which will change your decision in that brand. So I would just throw that out there. And me personally, I mean, if that's what you like to do, so kind of got two things here. Your fuel economy is going to be dependent. So like if you want a quicker boat with more fuel economy, you're going to get a skinnier boat. A skinnier boat means that it's going to get more speed and get better fuel economy, but it's going to be a wetter ride, and you're also going to be more tippy. So, whenever you get somewhere, you're going to be, it's going to be a tippy boat because it's narrower. It doesn't have as big of a beam, and it's going to be a lighter hull, which makes it quicker and more fuel efficient. But if you get something that's heavier, not necessarily going to be the best in the fuel economy, and your cruising speed, most of the 30 to 35 footers with outboards these days, if you're talking Yellowfin, CV, Grady White, Contender, any of these center consoles, Reef Runner, Front Runner, like all of these center consoles, 30 to 35 foot range, most of them are going to cruise in your 40 foot or 40 mile an hour to 45 mile an hour range. Yeah, you can get it down to like 30 to 35 if you're really trying to dial in that fuel economy, but most of them, as long as they're not underpowered, they're going to cruise around 40. Like that's become pretty standard with the center consoles. Most of them are going to have a top speed of 50 to 55. So your cruise, depending on how much your fuel economy is and how weighted down that boat is, then you're going to be 40's going to be pretty standard. And then also the 300 mile range, most of those 30 to 35 foot boats are going to have a few hundred gallons of fuel on the boat. So probably 250 to 400, maybe 450, depending on the brand. But as far as a center console, me personally, my favorite is probably going to be a CV. I love the ride of a CV, any of those. The 32s, the Z model is going to get you a little bit better fuel economy, a little bit more top speed, but The B model, still a massive fan of the B model. It doesn't have any strakes in the hull. So that would be my first pick. First pick, if you're going to do like a 30 to 32, again, I don't know how many people you're trying to take and like what exactly you're trying to do, but the ride that the CV has is, I mean, it's outstanding. I'm just trying to think about, if you're taking out 4 to 6 people, I'm just trying to think about the comfort of the ride, because there are other ones, if you're trying to completely change the way the boat is with the seating and the wiring and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of going to depend on, the year too. So something to think about. Older boats are not going to be as fast. Like if you're looking for that 40 mile an hour and you're in the 30 to 35 foot range of like an early 2000s boat that you're trying to redo, like a lot of those are going to be more towards the 30 to 35 mile an hour cruising speed. If you're looking at like, a Venture, a Pursuit, a Grady White, any of those older models, they're going to be more towards the 30 to 35 mile an hour cruising range. Whereas like if you're looking for 40s, early 2000s, you're going to have to go with, the Fountain, the CV, the Contender, Invincible, Formula. You're going to have to be more towards those performance boats to get that amount of speed. It wasn't until the last 10, 15 years that those brands are now getting that speed out of them. All those Grady Whites and stuff, the 32s, the 36 or whatever, all those are cruising at 30 miles an hour. A 34 Venture is cruising at 34 miles an hour, somewhere in there, depending on the power it's got on it. Same thing for a Pursuit. Like a Pursuit, awesome boat, but your cruising speed is going to be 30 to, it's going to be mid to low 30s for those heavier, older boats. The newer boats, cruising speed's going to be around 40 miles an hour. Not much of a problem there, but obviously if you're redoing the boat, then you can put the power on there that's going to give you that cruising speed. So honestly, your hull speed for a lot of those isn't really going to be a problem. I'd probably be looking at, like I said, CV, a Contender, a Reef Runners are nice. They're a little expensive and that's kind of newer, but a Formula, a Fountain, something like that. But honestly, if I was doing what you're doing, I would also be looking at like, if you're going to be redoing it yourself, you can get an older boat. Like let's say you get a little bit more and you get a 38. So like a 38 Fountain that's got the cuddy in the front. Now all of a sudden you've completely changed the way you're using this boat, because now you can make it and stay in the boat. You're going to have the same cruising speed. You're going to be triple engines though, where I think what you're trying to do with the 30 to 35, you're probably trying to only go with 2 engines. So, there is that fact. That's just a very, very large topic to discuss without getting some budget involved, and then also getting a little bit more dialed into what exactly you're doing with the boat. But twin engines, I'd say you're looking in the 32 foot range, and I'd be looking at that 32 CV if I was you, Ryan. Anyway, let us know in the comments below, though, because I think this is a great discussion, and I think there's plenty of people, let us know how you use your boat, and like if you were in this situation, what would you be looking at? Vindicator FSX is now saying that, is there a way to tell when a gel coat is completely dead? My 75 Seacraft was painted with all grip in 2010 because the original red gel coat was basically pink. We never took it to a professional to see if it was worth saving. So, wow, a 1975, like that is, honestly, I think you could probably bring it back to life. I don't think that painting it would probably be that big of a deal. We're talking about a red hull. Any of those deep colors, red, blue, black, dark colors, even that weren't that dark when they came out, the grays, stuff like that, it's not necessarily that the gel coat goes bad. It's just the outside gets so heavily oxidized. Honestly, I don't know about a 75 Seacraft, because I have seen some Seacrafts with some pretty rough gel coat where you've got a lot of chipping, a lot of voids, a lot of bubbling. depending on how the boat was maintained. So it wasn't just the fading of the gel coat a lot of them had voids in the gel coat, and it had, bubbles all over the place. So, that was a problem, then yeah, painting, there's nothing you could do about that. But as far as like the gel coat goes, gel coat's thick. You got, I don't really know how thick. Maybe you got you got 1/16 of an inch, let's say a 1/16 of an inch of gel coat, if not a little bit more. Then you can sand a lot of that down and have good gel coat. You can hit it with an 800 grits wet sand and take all that oxidization off, all that dead gel coat, and get down to nice clean gel coat. As long as the gel coat original was solid. If it had voids in it or if it had something else, then it would have been a problem. But as far as like the red dye turning pink, I'm pretty sure a lot of that is surface related. It's not necessarily like underneath the gel coat. I want to say that underneath that, if you wet sand that, it's not like all the dye turned pink, unless there was something going on there that I obviously don't know anything about. The dye of the gel coat went pink for whatever reason. That's something that's possible. That I don't really know how that really works with the chemical makeup of a dye that you put into a gel coat. So if there was something that would be a problem with that, but what I would have done is I just hit it with a test spot. Take 1,000 grit sandpaper and just do a little inconspicuous spot, maybe on the transom or somewhere where you can just wet sand a little spot and see if you get that surface off. And if you do, then you start wet sanding. And if it comes out, then I think you would be surprised. A lot of people would be very surprised on how much a wet sand can do to gel coat and how thick gel coat is. I mean, with paint, completely different. You can't just do that with paint because paint's a very, very thin layer, but gel coat's thick. And when you wet sand it, it is amazing how well it will shine. It's a lot of work. So don't get me wrong there. It's a lot of work, but having to do a wet sand, a cut, and a polish on a boat is going to save you thousands of dollars versus a paint. I mean, especially if you're doing it yourself. So that's kind of what I think. I would have done a test spot on that one as far as but the 75, I mean, that's an old boat. So there could have been something else that I really don't know about. Kingfish 3066 says, I also have a Vivor hydraulic steering for my boat. It's 3 years old. I use Marvel Mystery Oil instead of paying $30 a bottle for hydraulic fluid. This system has been more reliable than the previous Seastar unit. It has never leaked anywhere, knock on wood. I've never heard of that. I mean, I have to say that I've never heard of that. And wow, that's interesting to me, because you would think that Marvel Mystery Oil would create a leak somewhere, and then also it's a hydraulic system. So for one, paying $30 for the Seastar, yeah, I think a lot of that is the biodegradableness of hydraulic fluid that makes it more expensive, and then also the clear. I don't know the chemical makeup of automatic transmission fluid or hydraulic fluid. So, if that's what you do as a profession and 100 times more than I do about hydraulic fluid, then great for you. From an outside perspective, in a hydraulic steering system on a boat, I mean, by and large, the older systems, they've all got ATF in it. It's $5 a bottle. Well, maybe not now. I don't know with the economy and all that, but he's, normally like $5 a bottle for a bottle of ATF, and boom, that's it. So, spending the $30 on that stuff, that's different. But I must say, hearing someone use Marvel Mystery Oil for their hydraulic fluid in their steering system, that's a first for me. And 3 years strong. So, a steering system that costs you $350 and a $5 bottles is pretty amazing. So, to have hydraulic steering, it's way better than mechanical. Thank you for letting us know. That's never heard of that. Ruben Campos also says he's got a 2-stroke carbureted 150 horsepower Mercury outboard motor that overheats at high RPMs. Telltale is strong in both thermostats, open/work fine. Any suggestions, please? So anytime that you are overheating an engine at high RPM, it's generally one, you're getting a hot spot, meaning you got, friction, or you've got a blockage. So like if you've got an issue with your engine where it's creating a hot spot, meaning you're lacking in lubrication, or you've got, a piston ring that's, failing, or something along those lines where you've got friction creating heat, meaning you've got an oil problem, not necessarily a heating problem, you need to make sure that you don't have a hot spot. If you got a hot spot, you need to get that fixed, because it is going to blow up your engine if you do not fix it. And then on the other side, if it's peeing strong, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has not got a blockage somewhere. So I'm going to be looking at the poppet valve and make sure that that poppet valve is not working right. Like it's not, stuck open, dumping all your water, or it's stuck closed, not moving water, whatever the case may be. And then also any time that I have an issue like this, if you got a heating issue, go and buy a thermometer. Go and buy a thermostat, a little laser thing. You can get them cheap, $20, $30, whatever. You can get them on Amazon for probably even cheaper than that. Go get a thermostat. Go get something with a little laser on it, and you can point and see the temperature. As soon as the thing starts overheating, look at it. Start pointing that thermostat all over the place and look for a hot spot. Look down both sides of the cylinders on the block, and then look across the head, look around the water jackets, all that stuff. You want to make sure that you don't have a hot spot, because if you got a hot spot, then that could be a problem. Also, make sure that the temperature sensor is working, because it might not even be overheating. You could just have a bad temperature sensor, which is not unheard of for a 152 stroke carbureted engine. But those are the two things that I'm going to be looking at. Is one, is it really overheating? And then two, since you've got water flow out the telltale, making sure that the poppet valve isn't messed up. And then after that, looking at your water jackets and all that thing, pull the thermostat. What's it look like in there? Because you could have a blockage. Maybe it's sand, debris, dirt, grass, something in a water jacket that is not allowing water flow through a specific passage, which creates a hot spot, which then overheats the engine. Jared Zeno says his Yamaha 150 started to steam out the upper exhaust port, changed thermostats and water pumps with no change. Any ideas? Jared, same thing. Same exact situation. I'm going to be looking at that poppet valve. And then also, if you've got steam, then it's getting hot. On a Yamaha 150, is this a 4-stroke? Is it a 2-stroke? And why is it not ringing the bell? Why is the buzzer not going off? It should be overheating. It should be giving you a signal saying, hey, yo, I'm getting hot. Definitely it should be giving you a warning buzzer, letting you know that it is overheating. So that's something that I would be looking at. And then also steam, is it smoke coming out the exhaust? Is it something else? What color's the smoke? Is it blue? Is it gray? What is the color of the smoke? Because you could be burning oil. You could be, getting water. You could have a head gasket that's going bad, and now you're getting water in, and you're creating, steam. So there's a couple things that you're going to need to look at there. I would definitely look more into that problem. Deathhawk81 says, I'll say this. Ethanol fuel is what destroyed my boat's fuel tank. A 1992 Sea Swirl aluminum tank rotted out, seeing my late uncle use cheap gas with ethanol in it, and thus sat for 10 to 12 years. Oof. Yeah. No. 10 to 12 years, dude, that is way too long, and especially for ethanol. You cannot leave ethanol. You can use, so if you use ethanol fuel in your boat, there's literally nothing wrong with that. You can burn ethanol all day long, no problem, as long as you're burning it out. You cannot let that stuff sit in there. And then also, I would definitely be cycling tanks. So if you do 3 fill-ups of ethanol and it takes you, say, 4 weeks to do, I would then burn 1 or 2 tanks of non-ethanol just to help clean and wash out any of that stuff. But if you use an ethanol and you let it sit for, say, it takes you a month or 2 months to get through your tank, use Rev X. That's, use adrenaline, and that is going to help you to use that ethanol. But if that boat's going to sit for 10 to 12 years, no, bad situation, because ethanol is going to absorb water. As soon as the ethanol absorbs the water and the ethanol pull out, it separates from the gas, and then the water pulls the corrosive properties out of the ethanol, and boom, now you have a corrosive liquid sitting in the bottom of your fuel tank. And corrosion on aluminum, it's going to sit there and pit holes in the aluminum, and next thing you know, 12 years later, you got to rip the deck out of that boat, you got to cut the fuel tank out. boom, you're in for a $10,000 repair because of ethanol. So yeah, definitely a disclaimer on ethanol, and you cannot let that stuff sit in your boat unless you're really trying to spend some money and deal with an issue. Pass, call in. Hey, I have a Merc 1998 150 horsepower XL offshore edition 2-stroke. We broke down last week and we're trying to start it. Took the cover off and noticed a fuel vent spraying out gas. When we tried to start it, what do you think I would need to replace first? Thanks. So, your VST, you need to get in the VST. Inside the VST, there is a float and needle assembly. And that needle assembly, basically when the VST fills up, the float goes up and shuts it off. So that way it won't take in any more fuel. Most likely that float's busted, or there's something in your vent that's stopping that from closing. And that's why it's just filling up the VST and pouring it right out the vent. So yeah, pull that VST apart and clean that biscuit out. You might have to change the needle assembly on there, but yeah, that's the first place I'm looking if your vent's got fuel coming out of it. Dwayne Roberts says, I was thinking about using an epoxy to fill some of the pitting in the corrosion on my lower unit so I could sand it down and paint it. Any thoughts? I'm hoping I can find an epoxy strong enough to bond, but easy enough to sand. You know, realistically, you can use any of that stuff. You can use epoxy, you can use any of that. So a lower unit casing's aluminum. You sand it down, you prepare it right, you can really use anything. You can use an epoxy with a filler. You can use the Bondo fiberglass stuff. You can use Total Boat, Total Fair. You can use, anything. It's a filler. It's just like a body filler on a car, except for it's a lower unit and it's in the water. The only thing that you need to be concerned about is the heat and the painting, because if the painting isn't right, then you're going to have an exposed filler. Doesn't matter what it is, if it's epoxy or a metal filler, if it's a Bondo filler, whatever. I wouldn't use regular Bondo though, because regular Bondo will absorb water, so I would not use that. But the Bondo fiberglass stuff wouldn't be bad. And I don't really know about Total Boat, Total Fair, and what the properties of that, but it's very similar. A lot of this is the same stuff. You could even use JB Weld on there. You can paint that JB Weld on there, sand it down. Any of those fillers are going to be all right as long as you prep it right, so that way it holds to the metal. It's just like doing body work on a car. It's the panels are some form of a metal or aluminum, and Bondo sticks to that. So it's all in the preparation, and then the coverage. As long as it gets painted, you prime it and you paint it, then it's going to be fine. So obviously epoxy with a filler is going to be the hardest thing to sand, and then Bondo is going to be the easiest. But yeah, it's as long as you prepped it right to where it's going to hold. Any of those products are going to hold right, and then also you paint it. As long as it gets covered correctly with a primer, you can even do a zinc primer with a primer over that, and then the paint over that, and then the clear coat over that. You're talking about, let's say you do 2 coats of each, that's 8 coats. If you do 3 coats, that's 12 coats. So you're talking about 12 coats of paint all over this stuff. So any of the products that you use, there shouldn't be water getting to it. As long as it isn't affected by, heat, then any of those fillers are going to be fine to use. Candido Ramirez says, I have a 1999 Yamaha 152 stroke. A lot of 150s up in here today. My gauges are sun damaged and no longer working. Is there a way I can find out how many hours my engine has? It runs perfect and it never gives me any issues. I'm just curious what hours are on the engine. So if it's carbureted, I do not think so. If you have a carbureted 150, I do want to say that all the hours are stored on the gauge. One thing that you could do, though, is depending on the damage of the gauge, if you take that gauge out of there, send it to gagesaver.com, they will redo the gauge, send it back, and boom, you didn't lose your hours. Now, if engine is fuel injected, like let's say it's an OX66, then I'm pretty sure those do store the hours. 99, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that it did store hours in 99 and 150, OX66, saltwater series, whatever it is. I'm pretty sure you can pull hours off of the computer on that engine. Carbureted, definitely not. You're not going to get no hours off of that. But that would be the 2 things that I would say. Other than that, you're out of luck. No getting them hours back. AC89 says, I find incredible not having a valve for anything that's going through the hull under the waterline. I even put valves if it's just above the waterline in some cases and try to make an access to easily operate such valve. Maybe I'm crazy, but it gives me peace of mind. Speaking of valves, what's your opinion on composite valves versus a Gemlux True Design compared to bronze valves? So talking about through hull fittings, and I also think it's pretty amazing that anything that's under the waterline, if there's not a valve on there, I mean, I think that's pretty ballsy myself. But also, as far as the bronze versus, the composite or anything like that, like, if you got a plastic through hull fitting valve, the bronze is going to be way more expensive than the composite or the plastic. But in all honesty, I've seen older valves, like, a 25-year-old plastic through hull valve that still functions beautifully. Whereas I've seen other ones, just given the, if you use it in saltwater, even if there's no time on it, let's say there's 100 hours on it, a bronze fitting that's in the saltwater like that, it's been used, for 100 hours in saltwater, then I've seen them seized up to where you can't even move them. So honestly, I'm a fan of obviously the metal. It's going to be thicker, it's going to be stronger, it's going to be harder, it's going to be stronger. So obviously there is that. It's going to cost a lot more than the plastic or the composite, but as far as like outside of budget, I don't think there's one better than the other realistically, because like I said, I've seen 25-year-old plastic ones that, because they're in the hull, they're not really like exposed to sun or stuff like that. So it's not like they're really getting the weather that's going to, damage them. Like they're not going to get brittle and break as long as they weren't sun exposed. Then most of them, I guess I could probably walk that one back, because if you got a really, really cheap plastic one, then I'm sure, that's going to be junk. But just a decent run-of-the-mill composite through hull, most of them hold up pretty well. So I don't say I could have one over the other, Obviously, if money's not an option, I'm going to go with the bronze because it's metal, but you save a lot of money, and is it really that much better? I mean, there's probably an argument made on both sides. Zach Pickett says, I just bought a 17-foot Havoc with the Mud Buddy 40 EFI Gator Tail. Haven't heard you talk about them at all. Service drive engine, maybe that's what it's called. Yeah, they're called mud motors or surface drives. What's your opinion? Should I swap it out for a Merc 90 or 115 eventually? I don't really talk about that kind of stuff because I don't have a lot of experience with it. And also it's a very, very niche specific item. So like the mud motor, even though, I know they call it mud motor, and realistically it's more an engine, but anything that runs on gas is really an engine. As far as it being, it's a specific use. Like it's being used to go into a marsh, into a swamp. You're hunting, ducks or whatever it may be, hogs, whatever's out in the marsh. Like there's places that an outboard's not going to get you there. Even, obviously the lower unit's going to, be the factor there, but like they're made to get you into mud. Like it's like an airboat. You're using an airboat to get on land and on the water, like in marshes, in grassy areas. Like an outboard is not going to get you there. It's going to, one, have pickups where it's going to overheat because it's going to be picking up a bunch of mud and grass. It's not going to work. And then two, you don't have the depth. You're going to get the boat stuck and it's not going to work right. So if you're using it for that purpose, like if you're going duck hunting, you're going in the marsh, you're going out into these areas, then you need the mud drive. You need the surface drive. You need the mud motor. That's what you're using it for. So it's very, very specific. So that Mud Buddy, 100%. I would probably leave it the way it is because it's a specific use boat. Now, if you're not doing that with the boat and you're really more looking for fuel economy and you're looking for efficiency, then yeah, you could do the Merc 90 or 115, but you need that mud drive on there if you're using it in that fashion. Usually people that buy a 17-foot Havoc with the Mud Buddy, you're duck hunting or you're doing whatever out in the marsh, and that's why you got that kind of boat, because that's kind of what it's built for. So, it's very, very specific use. If that's what you're using it for, I would not change that. I don't really know that much more about them. I don't really work on them that much. An engine's an engine. I can fix it if it's gasoline engine. It's not like it's going to be something complicated, but it's just that, it's what it is. It's very specific. The Merc 9115, if you're talking about doing an outboard, all depends on how you use the boat. Dennis says, hey guys, before I start investigating, how much water is acceptable to collect in fuel filters? I get about 1/3 of a glass in each filter every 100 gallons passing through. 200-gallon total fuel will produce 2/3 of a glass of water. It seems like a lot, and I don't recall ever having this issue. This started about 6 months ago. Maybe I have a leaking gas cap, gasket, or O-ring, or maybe I need to get my fuel elsewhere. What you think? Yeah, I think you got it right. I mean, that's too much for 100 gallons. You should not be doing that unless you got ethanol. If you're filling up with ethanol, for sure. That's depending on the time frame. Condensation, it's going to absorb that water. You're going to get that much water if you're using ethanol based on a period of time and how long it takes you to consume that 100 gallons. Now, other than that, yeah, you could have a leaking fuel cylinder, a leaking vent, a leaking gasket on the fuel cap. Totally could be it, depending on the rain and stuff like that. And then water spray of the boat, water spray getting on there. But other than that, you might have a hole in your tank where you're getting water in the tank because the tank's got a hole in it. So hopefully it isn't that. And then also, yeah, depending on where you're getting your gas, you could get a batch of bad gas. But to be that consistent, I don't know how many times you've done this, how many 100 gallons you've done this test over the last 6 months. Usually, I mean, if you get a batch of bad gas that has some water in it, it's usually a one-time event. It's very unlikely that a gas station is consistently getting bad gas. And if it is, usually it doesn't take long for that to be found out and that to be addressed. Like, it's very, very regulated. And I don't think if people are getting that much water, you would assume that would get, shut down. So as far as where you get the gas, I'd probably be leaning more away from that issue. Not saying it's not a possibility, but most likely it's more, like you said, a leak somewhere, or if you're getting ethanol, it's the ethanol problem. You could also test the gas. So like if you've got, if you've got an ethanol tester, or if you got a suspicion, just take some of that gas from the fuel tank. When you fill up the boat, take, a bottle, take anything that's got measurements on it. You can get a RevX, ethanol tester, but realistically, you can test it with anything that you want. All you got to do is, let's say you take a bottle that has markings on it and it's by the ounces. So if you've got 10 ounces, you can mark 10 ounces. You're going to put in 1 ounce of water, and then you're going to put in 9 ounces of your gasoline, shake it up, and it's going to pull any ethanol out of there, and then you'll be able to see, did it go up from 1 ounce up? Then it's got a percentage of ethanol in there. So I might be off on that calculation there, but that's how you would do it. It is just measure out, put 1 ounce of water, 10 ounces of gasoline, whatever it is, shake it up. If you've got more than 1 ounce of water after, that thing's got ethanol in it. So that's how you would test that, but that's kind of where we're at. 10% Fishing says he's got a 2000 Mercury 200 carbureted outboard. It's overheating at full speed only, and no mechanic was able to figure it out. Thermostats, water pump, and poppet valve have already been changed. What's your thoughts? Thoughts is the same as I was earlier with the other conversations, and you need to be looking at hot spots. Is it really overheating? And then also, you've got your water jackets. There's a clog somewhere. If you've changed thermostats, the poppet valve, your water pump, then there's another issue. Either water tube that feeds the water from the impeller to the power head, something going on with that, or you've got, a hot spot. You've got sand, debris, something inside the engine that's not allowing water to flow. You've got to get a thermometer out or a thermostat and, figure out where the hot spot is, and then clean it out. Do a flushing, do a ridline flush. So that's what I'd be doing. I'd be doing a ridline flush, and then also I'd be looking for, a hot spot. Is it really overheating? What's the temperature it's overheating? That kind of stuff. So we'll do one more today, and it's going to be from Pimp Geens. Says, question, buddy, do you have a trim removal guide? I have to remove the entire system for a rebuild and not too sure how hard it's going to be. totally model dependent. If you got a Yamaha, you got a Mercury, you got a Suzuki, depending on your engine, that's going to determine the difficulty of it. No, we do not have a specific, video of that. I think I have one for a Verado and maybe one for a Yamaha, but all the models are different. If you got a Verado, super easy to take it off. You just take the the trim cylinder out, take the pins out, take the bolts out the bottom, and drop the thing out. Boom, easy. Other models, most Yamahas, you just take the 6 bolts out and then disconnect it from the tilt pin and pull the thing out. Other models, not so easy. You have to disconnect one side, undo the steering thing, and roll the bracket out of the way, and then pull it out. Like, the difficulty is totally determined by what model engine you have. And that's going to be it for this week. See you guys next week.